On today's show, the deadline is looming for the Atlanta Hawks and the rest of the NBA. There's plenty to get to, and it's all coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1902 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Tuesday evening here in early February. And today's podcast is sponsored by the folks at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Please check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcast. That includes Apple and Spotify, as well as on YouTube. Please like this video as you're watching it, plus leave your comments and tell your friends about the show. Today will be kind of a mini podcast of sorts, maybe a little bit shorter than usual, but it is deadline week, to be sure. I'm recording this on Tuesday night, about 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. The deadline is less than 48 hours away right now. As you're listening to this, it's probably less than 40 hours away, something like that. It is, as a reminder, 3 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday is the magic time for the trades to be settled by. The Hawks do play a game on Wednesday at home that we'll touch on at the very end of this podcast. And I'll have a podcast after that game, no matter what happens on Wednesday. But in between games, a nice win, by the way, for the Hawks on Monday on the road to Detroit, which I broke down in depth on this show. So if you missed that, please listen to that episode as well and the latest trade stuff. But for the most part, it's going to be just a trade deadline kind of check-in right now. Nothing is hugely breaking for the Hawks. Lots of big names around the league are available, it seems like. There's been some Kevin Durant talk today, Jimmy Butler talk today. Even some mild LeBron James talk in the last couple of days, post Luka and AD trades. It's been a bevy of rumors. The Hawks have been a little bit quieter than some teams, but every time there's a mention of the league as a whole, the Hawks are kind of in like the middle tier of like, all right, this is an interesting team to monitor right now. And that's kind of what I think they are right now too. The Hawks are active. They are making calls. I've been hearing people all week long. I make my calls and texts and stuff to people around the Hawks, around the league, other sources. It's a busy time, to be sure. And look, I'm not Shams. I'm not Jake Fisher. I'm not Mark Stein. But I hear things, and I cover the team, and I have been covering the team for a long time. So it's an interesting time, to be sure, around the Hawks. So this is not really in any specific order, but for the most part, until the end of the show, I want to talk a little bit about Hawks Spurs on Wednesday. It'll be kind of a roundup of where things are, the players who are available for the Hawks, the latest intel, etc. And we'll dive in here to what I don't even want to say it's new, because it's really not, but it's kind of the most new spotlit thing that happened today on Tuesday. And that's around DeAndre Hunter. So Jake Fisher, my friend, been on the show before, who covers the league now for Bleacher Report as well as for the Steinline, mentioned Hunter on a Bleacher Report video stream as a guy who's a very possible trade candidate for the Hawks, broadly speaking. That's not a huge surprise. Hunter has always been available. He's played well this season, which we'll come back to in a second, but this is not a huge game-breaking thing that he's available in trade. Mike Scotto of Hoops Hype, a very plugged-in guy, a lot has broken some news, etc. Mike actually pointed out that Hunter has, quote, drawn some trade interest from the Cleveland Cavaliers in recent days. I heard someone today plugged in on the Cleveland side of things that said there were at least some talks there semi-recently between the Hawks and the Cavs. Not sure how serious those got, but certainly that's happened at some point in recent days. And look, Hunter's been really good this year. He is, for my money, the number one Sixth Man of the Year candidate, certainly on the top three of that list for sure, averaging 19 points a game, really having his best season of his career so far individually, 61% true shooting, like having a great season for the Hawks. He was made up earlier, but since he got back, he's been healthy. Knock on wood, of course, if you're a Hawks fan. He's been playing great. But there is a lot of money owed to Hunter for the next 2.5 years. This year, he makes $21.7 million. And then after this year, it's about $48.2 million over 2 seasons. So an average annual value of like 23-ish Hunter over the next 2.5 years. It's a lot of money. So there's one school of thought that the Hawks could maybe look to sell high, quote unquote, on Hunter right now. On one hand, he's been really good this year. His individual shot creation has been huge for the Hawks. His shot making is huge for the Hawks. They don't have a lot of that on this team right now. It's a weakness of the Hawks overall. It would be even worse if they were to trade him. He's also the kind of 6'8" forward that every single team always wants, that can shoot it on offense and defend enough. Look, he's not a great defender. His pre-draft early career defense is not coming back. He's not going to be like this game changer defensively, but he is a totally fine defender, not a huge impact guy, but certainly someone that's not going to get you killed defensively either. And there is value in that when you are 6'8" and you can shoot. But on the other hand, before this year, he was extremely available in trades, to the point where, how should I say this? I would say the Hawks could have traded him, if they could have traded him for neutral value, like this summer or in the year before that, they probably would have. That extension that they gave him looks fine right now, but a year ago it did not look fine. When they gave it out, people around the league were like, why did they do that contract? It's not a disaster, but it's not one that like you're super in love with. So things have changed a little bit, to be sure, because he's played well this year. But look, there's a question that's a realistic one. Like, how much do you want to lean on this 2.5 months, which is what it is? He kind of came back from the injury in like December. And since then, he's been great. But before that, he was, was banged up and not that great. So how much of that do you want to lean on? He's had trouble staying healthy in his career. He has the well-documented knee issues that have been limiting him for quite some time. And look, he shot it incredibly well this year. That's probably not going to be fully sustainable. I think he is a real good shooter. Like, there's not like any surprise about that, but probably not to this degree, I would say. So some regression there, maybe. He doesn't really impact the game in a lot of other ways. Last night was kind of funny. He had this game on Monday where he had 20 points and literally zeros across the board. That is overstating it, but he is mostly a scorer at this point on offense. Doesn't really pass the ball very well. Never rebounds the ball very well, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, good player for sure, but there is a debate still around the league as to whether that's a good contract or not. It's not a great one at the very least. It's not a terrible one either, but it's somewhere in the middle, and it's a lot of money for him in the next 2+ years. So where I would be right now is if someone wants to treat Hunter in a trade as if he is a clearly positive contract and trade asset and want to trade that kind of value for him, you have to at least listen. You don't have to trade him, but if someone says, look, we're going to give you an expiring contract and a first-round pick for DeAndre Hunter, you got to listen. I'm not saying you have to do it, but it's a reasonable offer, to be sure. It would make you worse in the short term. That's this balance the Hawks have been doing now for a long time. If you're a new listener, what I've been saying, this is the short version, but the Hawks post-Jalen Johnson injury are still trying to make the playoffs. They still have a chance to do that for sure, to be in the play-in, et cetera. But I think the win now aspect has kind of been dulled a little bit, and some of the pain of getting worse in the short term with a Hunter trade, with a, as we'll get into later on, maybe a Capela trade, even a Bogdanovic trade might make you worse in the short term, but that's not the point right now. It's kind of like, does this make sense for you long term? So we will see about that. So, look, you don't just trade him to trade him, is what I would say. If you do, you'll be looking for more shooting and more forward depth moving forward, which makes sense because he's a good shooter and he's another forward that you need. If you move him, it is kind of acknowledgement to some degree. The Hawks don't really fully believe that this year's Hunter is the guy that they are going to get long term, both for maybe durability reasons as well as like what they want the position. So we'll see. So I would say it's not likely he gets moved, but it's interesting as far as a potential guy that could be available. From what I am hearing, the Hawks will at least take your call on DeAndre Hunter, and the Cavs have been calling. On that Cavs front, Cleveland, by the way, is trying to win the title this year. Like, that's where they are. They're a legitimate, like, maybe fringe, but at least fringe, if not better, contender to win the championship this year. And from what I can gather, I think Karis LeVert would be the natural matching salary. He makes about 17-ish million, a little bit below that. It's expiring, which would be interesting for the Hawks. They could also match that salary with like Jalen Tyson, who was their first-round pick this last year, makes like $3 million, maybe a combination of smaller contracts. Like, I would like to get, if I was the Hawks, Craig Porter Jr., who's a backup point guard type, but someone who I would like more than Keaton Wallace, for instance, who's very cheap, could be kind of a throw-in, but also a useful player for you. I'm not sure what the Cavs would offer. I'm not sure. I think it's probably LeVert plus whatever else. That's the most natural combination because they don't want to trade Max Strus, et cetera, et cetera. But LeVert's expiring. That would make sense to me. Clear some money off the books if you're the Hawks. But look, there's nothing imminent here that I'm aware of right now at all. That popped up today as a reporting thing. I got questions about it, so I wanted to at least address it at the top of the show. Hunter is available, but he is not as available as guys like Bogdanovic or Capela. I think it would be at least a mild surprise if Hunter was traded. I would not be shocked. I wouldn't fall out my chair. It's still a sub 50% chance for sure. It's a low chance right now from what I understand, but things can change. And it only takes one offer that you love. So stay tuned, but I think he's available, but not one of those guys that I'm like, all right, this is probably going to happen. I've not gotten there to this point. Okay, more to come on the show about Bogdanovic, about Brandon Ingram, about a little bit of Capela, Larry Nance, Spurs stuff, and more, but all that is coming up in just one moment. This show is brought to you by Gametime. Are you looking for tickets for your next big event? Whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sporting event, find the right ticket at the right price can be a headache sometimes, but at Gametime and Gametime Picks, it's never really been easier. Let me tell you how it all works at Gametime. The app does all the hard work for you. It does not waste your time with endless searches. I've been using Gametime Picks for a long time now. I love it for many reasons. The curated deals that they have make it very simple to find great tickets at a great price. You have to sift through a lot of different options either, which makes it easier for you. I recently grabbed a super deal for a prime seat at Gametime. I couldn't believe the value, honestly. It was an absolute steal. The seat view feature is a game changer in a big way. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly where my seat was going to look like in the venue. That's very, very reassuring if you are a buyer of tickets. And the best part is you're covered by Gametime's lowest price guarantee as well. And your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something happens to come up. Take all of the guesswork out of buying tickets right now with the folks at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and use that code. It is LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, and now elsewhere on the Hawks front, I'll be a little bit shorter here because Hunter I haven't talked about for a while now, but with Bogey, with Capela, it's nothing super new. So Bogdanovic is a guy that I've been saying in the last week or so, I believe it is flat out likely that Bogey is traded before Thursday. It's not 99%. It's definitely not 100%. That's a key distinction people have been saying or implying locally. I know it's just like social media stuff, whatever, that like he's definitely gone. No, I would not say that. It's not 100%. They've not agreed to a deal. None of that stuff happened. I know he's been away from the team for a while. That is a relevant data point to be sure, but it's not definite. It is likely, in my opinion, from what I've heard, from what's been reported, what's behind the scenes, that Bogey will be traded, but likely is not definite. Anyway, I've heard they talked to like 6 or 7 teams about Bogey, and obviously he's been away from the team for a while. He's actually going to miss his 6th straight game on Wednesday without an injury designation at all for Bogey. Part of that's just making sure he's healthy at this point in time, but I think he'll be traded. We'll see. At the same time, nothing like new has been reported on Bogey the last few days. The Suns were mentioned, and I talked about that on the podcast. That's kind of cooled off a little bit from what I can understand. The Lakers pre-Luka trade were calling on Bogey. I think that doesn't make a lot of sense for them now. They don't really need more offense on the wing than they have now with Luka and LeBron in the mix. The Heat have been talked about, the Pelicans, et cetera, et cetera. Also, Mark Stein and Jake Fisher reported on Tuesday, as I'm reporting this today, that, quote, the expectation persists that the Hawks will still be moving the 32-year-old sharpshooter before the deadline on Thursday. And they noted that the Hawks are also, quote, exploring more ambitious trade constructions, possibly even involving Brandon Ingram, end quote. So speaking of Brandon Ingram, this is something I talked about a little bit earlier this week into last week. Ingram is on the radar for the Hawks. It's been a roller coaster of reporting over the last 5 days or so about Ingram. On Friday, it was kind of set off publicly by Ryan Windhorst on ESPN's Get Up on the TV side when he mentioned the Hawks being at least a possibility for Ingram. Then there was kind of a round of cold water poured on Ingram stuff on the Hawks side. I still don't believe the Hawks are the favorite or anything close to that for Ingram right now. In fact, like for example, like the Raptors are supposed to be in the mix for him. That's been kind of out there the last couple of days. Ingram is not, just to say this out loud, it's not just the Hawks. People have a tendency, and I get it, fans want to think about their team, but there are other teams involved here. The Pelicans are also weird about Ingram. Ingram's wanted an extension there for a long time. The Pelicans don't want to trade him for nothing. I get that, but the Hawks are in the mix, I would say, on Brandon Ingram to some degree. It's lingering out there. Importantly, he makes a lot of money this year, $36 million. He's also expiring, so he'll be a free agent this summer. Notably, he can extend his contract even after a trade. So if the Hawks traded for Brandon Ingram, they could extend him right away for up to 3 years. I don't know if you want to do that. I don't know if they want to do that. That's at least a possibility if they trade for him. But look, this is the short version. If they make the trade, I'll give you my full analysis at some point. But he's a very, very talented offensive player, like very talented. And he's not a terrible defender either. He has good size. He's 6'8", 6'9". He's 27 years old. Like there's a lot of appeal for Brandon Ingram. At the same time, he's expensive. He kind of needs the ball to be his best. And he's not super durable. So there's some knocks. There's some pluses. He would definitely help them right now. Offensively, it's not even up for debate. He would obviously help the Hawks on that end of the floor. But there's nuance here, to be sure. Also, Mike Scott reported today on Tuesday that the Pelicans are, quote, reluctant to take back future salary, end quote. Now, that's complicating because if they won't do that, which he didn't say, they said they're reluctant. I have a hard time getting the Hawks to an offer for Ingram without Bogey in it, and Bogey has future salary. So that's a question. Could be a 13, could be the Pelicans just like Bogey, whatever. That's a hiccup potentially there. I would guess some combination of Bogey, Capela, Bogey, Nance, something like that to get to enough money to get to Ingram. But again, that'll be later on. Capela's big expiring. That would be appealing to New Orleans, I'm sure. But stay tuned on that. Speaking of which, Clint Capela. The market's pretty quiet on the centers in general. It's been a lot of talk about the star forwards lately, for instance, on the market, and always perimeter guys shooting, etc. The centers have been a little bit quiet. The team that needs him the most probably right now is the Lakers, which is ironic. The money that LA would send back, though, is, for me anyway, like all negative value. I wouldn't want like eagerly to take on Jared Vanderbilt or Gabe Vincent or Rui Hachimura for like no compensation, because those guys are, for me, not super great contracts. They're all decent players, but that's complicating in some respects. Plus, there's this factor. The Hawks might not want to help the Lakers because the Lakers have the Hawks have the Lakers pick this year. Now, that's not a huge thing. Capela wouldn't change their lives, but right now, Clint Capela would be by far the best center on the Lakers as of right now today. So that is kind of a complicating factor. There is definitely a price where you just have to do it. And I'm not saying it's only the Lakers. Like, there are teams that could use Clint. Like the Knicks could use Clint, for instance. I don't know how they would do that. There's complicating factors because he makes a decent chunk of money this year and he is expiring. There's also nothing wrong with the Hawks not trading Capela. I think he is less likely to be moved than Bogdanovic, in my understanding. I'm not saying that it's impossible that they trade Clint and not Bogey. That's not impossible, but I'd be pretty surprised. I think Bogey is, I would say, considerably more likely to be traded than Clint at this moment. Again, that could change by tomorrow. So it's all fluid, but that's where I would be. Capela is more of like a coin flip, I think, whereas Bogey is likely to be dealt. And the Hawks, by the way, feel like they can bring Capela back if there's no deal there. I don't know what the role would be. We'll see. I don't think, obviously, the starting lineup stuff has kind of sailed at this point in time, but I think that the Hawks are still better right now today with Capela on the team than without him. But that's not the hugest consideration. So that's kind of where we are at this point. And the last couple of guys here, Larry Nance Jr., it's been quiet on him. The Hawks don't really want to trade Larry Nance Jr., at least not urgently, but teams have been calling all year long. Jake actually said this, Fisher's been saying this recently on today's video, but the Hawks are actually interested in extending or keeping Nance beyond the season, whether in an extension or a signing this summer. We'll see on that. If there's a cheap enough number, then sure. I don't think that Nance being the backup to Okongwu is a great situation. Like that, he's a good player, a good backup, but you want to have some size behind Okongwu, I think, long term. But Nance is a good player, and by the way, a great locker room guy. So that's why they like him. He's very useful. But he's expiring, and he fits like everywhere. So teams are going to call on him. If the Hawks get an offer that bowls them over, they'll trade him. If they don't, they probably won't. There you go. And then at the bottom of the roster, to round this out, you have guys like Zeller and Roddy. So I'm not going to do the Cody Zeller thing again, but he's literally been on the team this season for this moment. If the Hawks need his salary to throw in a deal, they will use it. If they don't trade him by Thursday, I will be shocked if he's not waived pretty soon after that to create the roster spot that they would have flexibility for. David Roddy is on the team for a different reason, but he also could be a cheap throw in on a deal. He's expiring contract, etc. Those guys are on the radar. And look, I won't go down the entire team right now, but I'm saying this the whole time. The only guys that I would be like very, very, very surprised if they got traded between now and Thursday are Trae Young, Zachary Richer, Dyson Daniels, Jalen Johnson. Now, there are tiers. I think Okongwu is not going to get traded, if I had to guess. Beat Krejci's a guy they like a lot. He's cheap too. They like him. So there are degrees of this, but there are four guys who I would be like, all right, probably not going to happen. Trae, Jalen, Richer, Dyson. Then there is the tier of, I would say, Okongwu and Veet. And then you got like the next tier down is like, I don't know how much value they have. Your Mo Gaze, your Garrison Matthews, Kobe Buffkin could be a throw-in for sure. Like, he's not playing right now, so it's not like a team would be buying on him in the short term, but he could be a sweetener in a deal. That could definitely happen. I mentioned Nance before, and then I already talked about everybody else. So that's the situation. That's kind of the Hawks rundown at the moment of the trade situations. Nothing is imminent. Nothing has been hugely reported. If that changes on Wednesday, if we get a big rumor, I'll hit on it after the game on Wednesday. If there's a trade, obviously, we'll swoop in to talk about it as fast as I possibly can. But that's kind of where we are at this stage. All right, in a moment, a brief look ahead to Hawks Spurs, and stay tuned for a word from our partners. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are some of the relationship green flags in your life? We often hear about red flags we should avoid. What if we focus more on identifying the signs of positivity in our relationships, which are those green flags? If you're not sure what they look like, therapy actually help you to identify them, actively practice them, and even embody that green flag energy for yourself. Whether you're dating, you're married, building a friendship, or just working on yourself, therapy can be helpful for everyone and forming relationships that love you back. Therapy also helps you develop healthy boundaries and improves your communication skills. It empowers you to be setting clear expectations and expressing your needs inside of your relationships. Therapy also provides tools for managing conflicts in ways that strengthen your connections rather than breaking your connections down. And BetterHelp makes it so easy for you by offering online therapy with over 30,000 licensed therapists to choose from. And if you have to actually want to switch therapists at any time, you can do so at no extra cost to you. Discover your relationship green flags right now with BetterHelp. And the place to go is betterhelp.com/lockedonnba right now. 10% off your first month if you use that URL. One more time, that URL is BetterHelp. That's better, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. All right, before we get out of here, a little bit of a look ahead to the game on Wednesday between the Hawks and the Spurs. It's actually a national TV game, a rare one of those for the Hawks. ESPN has it. I believe it is also on FanDuel Sports Network. So if you would rather watch/listen to my guys, Bob Rathbun, Dominique Wilkins, etc., that's available to you. But it's also a national game. So if you're not in the Atlanta market, that's where you'll need to find the game probably is ESPN. But it's actually an earlier tip-off as well. That game got moved to 7 o'clock versus the traditional 7:30. So just note that if you're listening to the podcast, don't miss the tip-off because you don't know. 7 o'clock start, ESPN at home against the San Antonio Spurs. So the Hawks lost the first matchup against San Antonio this year back in mid-December. It's been a while. That was an overtime game. It was very close. Wemby had a big one in that game, unsurprisingly. Look, the Hawks are similar, I would say, to the Spurs this season in terms of overall team quality. Now, they don't have Victor Wembanyama. That is notable. They do have Trae Young, who's quite good as well. But Wemby is a freak. In the first matchup, by the way, just say this out loud, Wemby ended up with 42 points and 4 blocks in the game. He hit 7 threes. He was the reason they were able to come back and force overtime and then also win the game. So there's that. But fairly similar, I would say, overall profiles. The Spurs are 21-26 this year. The Hawks 23 and 27. So a pretty similar winning percentage between the two teams. In fact, they're actually side by side right now in the NBA rankings for net rating, which is the point differential side of things. They're very similar in terms of overall team quality, but the Spurs just made a big trade to add to their team, and the Hawks have lost Jalen Johnson since then. So I think a middle-of-the-road viewpoint of this game would be the Spurs are the more talented team now. When you throw in De'Aaron Fox, you throw in Victor Wembanyama, and take Jalen off the team for the Hawks. And, by the way, even Capela and Bogey's having a bad season, but you take those guys away, that doesn't help the Hawks, at the very least, I don't think. And, by the way, the Spurs are night and day with and without Wembanyama. Not a huge surprise. By the way, I think Wemby is a top 10 player in the league already. He is that good. He's probably going to win the Defensive Player of the Year. If he didn't exist, I think Dyson would actually have a decent chance to at least crash the party in Defensive Player of the Year. But because Wemby is out there, that probably won't happen. He's going to win that award. But the Spurs have a plus 4-ish net rating this year with Wemby on the court. Now, that's not an incredible number, but that's a good team when Wemby plays. A solidly good team. When he's on the bench, they have a minus 10 net rating, which is a very bad team. As bad as anyone in the league not named the Wizards this year. Is what happens when Wemby sits. Now, that might change a little bit now with De'Aaron Fox on the team, but at the same time, the Spurs don't have a ton of depth. They're good. They have a lot of talent. They don't have it's a big drop off when Wemby sits. So this is a very simple thing. The Hawks need to win the minutes with Wemby on the bench on Wednesday, I would say. Another thing here, they're basically a top 5 defense when he plays, and they're a bad one when he doesn't. So that's another thing. The Hawks have been playing really well on offense. If you missed it, I won't spoil it all from Monday Night Show, but the Hawks played great on offense on Monday to get the win in Detroit, and they were good on offense in the previous game as well. So they've actually played well back-to-back games now on offense. Tough matchup for that standpoint, but they can definitely score if they make some perimeter shots. Of course, I sort of alluded to it already. The other big storyline for the game is it's going to be the debut of De'Aaron Fox. As I was recording this podcast, when I started it, they actually had Fox and Jordan McLaughlin listed as questionable because they got traded just a few days ago. But now, mid-podcast, they upgraded those guys to available. So everyone's now assuming, including me, that Fox is going to play. He might not play his full allotment of minutes. It might be a little bit clunky. He might have had one practice, if that. Probably not even that. Kind of like a walkthrough. So it'll be a little bit weird. Games around the deadline are always weird. Like, for example, the Hawks could conceivably make a trade before the game on Wednesday. And if they do that, anyone they trade can't play in the game. And whoever they would get in the trade wouldn't arrive before the game starts. So this time of year, and especially this game, like if there was a game that's going to be impacted by trades, it's going to be Wednesday. Because, yes, the Hawks can make trades on Thursday and then might not have guys for Friday, but this is the one to kind of circle on that front. Anyway, Fox is going to play, it looks like. Chris Paul, who they managed to keep in the Fox trade, is questionable. So that's the one big injury question for the Spurs in this game is Chris Paul. But because they have Fox, it's a little bit less of a concern for San Antonio. On the Hawks side, no Bogey, no Capela. They've been ruled out. Plus, of course, Jalen, Bufkin, and Zeller. So 5 guys out. We'll see on the G League stuff. At the moment, they've had all the G League guys with them other than Plowden on the whole road trip. So Keaton Wallace, Don Barlow have been around. Mo Gay's back up for a while. So that could change between now and then, but it hasn't changed yet. So I'm anticipating a similar rotation to what happened on Monday. Now they could go with Mo Gay again. That wouldn't surprise me. Same with Don Barlow. Like those guys are kind of interchangeable in some respects. They could go back to Roddy. I wouldn't personally, but that could happen at some point. But anyway, we'll see what happens there. And at the moment, also Trae Young probable right now. I think he'll play, but he's on the injury report. At the moment, the Hawks are about 4.5-point underdogs, according to our friends at FanDuel in this game. That's actually higher than I thought it was going to be for the Spurs. I think maybe they're getting the De'Aaron Fox like public bounce a little bit on that one. I don't think the Spurs are, if you factor in home court advantage, they would have them be like 7 points better than the Hawks on neutral court. I wouldn't go that far. I think the Hawks are not as good as the Spurs right now when you factor in them having Fox and the Hawks not having Jalen, but very winnable game. Like at the moment, by the way, 4.5 points is the same point spread that the Hawks were underdogs in on Monday in Detroit. And again, they won. So underdogs are underdogs. That makes sense in some respects. We'll see how Fox looks. We'll see how it all breaks down and, how the Hawks will operate. That's all I have on that game. I can do a full breakdown, but I won't. I'll talk about it in depth as I always do on the show on Wednesday. But look, man, the trade deadline is here. I wanted to kind of do a show on the one off day because Wednesday I'll have a game. I'll have any rumors attached to it, but that'll be that. And then Thursday, I will have a show whether the Hawks make a trade or not on Thursday. But it won't probably be till the evening. I have day job responsibilities. The deadline's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it'll probably be an evening show on Thursday. Win, lose, or draw for the Hawks. But anyway, that's all I have today. Please subscribe to the podcast. I very much appreciate everyone that's already done that. But all the time, I get metrics from YouTube. There are a lot of people that do not subscribe on YouTube that do watch the videos, which I do appreciate you watching. But if you made it this far, please subscribe on YouTube. And also, if you're already a YouTube subscriber, you can really help the show a lot if you also subscribe on an audio platform like Apple or Spotify or Amazon. Auto download the show, all that stuff. It's very, very much appreciated. Please rate and review the podcast as well. It's a big time for NBA podcasts to kind of hopefully grow some listenership during the deadline. And hopefully everybody will join us for beyond that too, because as a reminder, I am here 24/7, 365 on the Hawks. This is year 9 of me doing this podcast, and we don't stop after the deadline's over. So please subscribe, tell your friends, follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky. Go to follow me there at BT Rowland as well. And then I have all my non-podcast content covering the Hawks, some Brave stuff, some NBA stuff, etc., audio, writing, all of that in one place at patreon.com/BT Rowland there as well. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned. It's going to be a busy, hopefully, for entertainment purposes and all that stuff, 36 to 40 hours as I'm recording this podcast. We'll see you at the very latest after the game on Wednesday, and we'll see you all next time.